We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 83a. Gemara in the previous Talmud had discussed various opinions, Tanoim and Amoroim, who hold that when you have a psul, let's say the bailam become tameh, even though it's not a psul in the guf of the Karban Pesach, still you burn it immediately. You don't do ibor tzura, you don't let it decay overnight, you burn it immediately. And now Rabbah has another Tana who says the same thing. Rabbah Mosif Af Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Rabbah adds that even Rabbi Yossi HaGlili concurs with this opinion. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brayser, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili Omer, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili says, Kol Inyan Kulo, this entire parsha, Eino Medaber Ela Beparim HaNisrafim Uvesirim HaNisrafim. It's talking specifically about the parim that are burned and the seirim that are burned, the cows and the goats that are burned. Lisro Psulei and Abeis Habira, to burn them when they become puzzled by the Beis HaMikdash. Veliten Lo Saseh Al Achilasan, and to give a Lo Saseh on eating them. And Rashi will explain all of this. Rashi over here says, Kol Inyan Kulo means Kol Parsha Zu, the entire parsha of the following pasuk where it says, V'chol Chatos Asher Yuva Midama. It talks in the pasuk, you have a Karban Chatos where the blood is improperly brought into the Beis HaMikdash. Temuki lo Rabbanan v'Meseches Zvachim. Now the Rabbanan and Meseches Zvachim say that what's the parsha talking about? It's talking about Bechatos HaChitzon. It's talking about a regular Karban Chatos that's brought outside of the Heichol. Shehichnis Dama Lifnim. And the pasuk is saying if you bring the blood inside, which you're not supposed to do, V'zehu Psul Shalah, that's what creates the Psul. V'kama Rachmana Sheisarif. That's the Rabbanan's opinion. The Torah is telling you in this pasuk you should burn it. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili has a whole different way of learning this pasuk. Polig Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili disagrees with this interpretation of the pasuk. Umuki bechatos hapnimis, and he says actually the pasuk is talking about inner Karban chatos. Kagon par helam dover shel tzibor. For example, let's say you have a situation where the whole tzibor sinned, and they bring a par, they bring a bull. That's a chatos hapnimis. Asher yuva midama kimitzvasa elo el moed. And the case is you did properly. This was an inner Karban chatos. You brought the blood inside as is commanded. Lo sochal bo'esh tisaref, don't eat it, you should burn it. Uviv sara lo itzrich kran, you don't need any pasuk about the meat. Taksib beguve, because it already says v'saref oso al eitzim, it says you burn it on the wood. Ela shim nifsala biyotze uvatuma. What the pasuk is saying is, if you have this particular Karban chatas and it becomes puzzle, maybe there's a psul of yotze, it leaves its proper area. Maybe there's a psul of tuma. Bahakasav lilamedcha. So the pasuk is teaching you again about this specific chatas hapnimis. It's teaching you shetisrefena bebeis habira, that you have to burn it. V'lo chutz legimel machanos. Don't burn it outside of the three machanos kimitzvasa like the normal way you burn it. Rather, you burn it in the beis habira if there is a psul. V'liten lo saseh al achilas. And also, it gives a lo saseh, if there's a psul, you're not allowed to eat such a Karban chatas. So that's what Rabbi Yossi HaGlili said. Amru lo, now they, the Rabbanan, respond to Rabbi Yossi HaGlili and they say, chatos, a regular Karban chatos, shenichnas dama lifnai v'lifnim, where the blood came inside when it wasn't supposed to. Minayin, where do you learn that from? If the pasuk isn't talking about a chatos hachitzona, if the pasuk is talking about this chatos hapnimis, according to you, where do you learn that from? Amar lohen, so he said to them, it's from the statement that Moshe made to Aaron, hein lohuvo es dama la kodesh penima. Moshe says to Aaron, the blood wasn't brought inside the Kodesh. Mechlal di nafiki nami ayil dama b'sreifa. The implication is if it did go out, or if it went in, if the blood went in improperly, then you are going to burn it. So you learn now from Moshe Rabbeinu's statement to Aaron, this halacha by the chatas hachitzona. And Rashi over here explains, Amru lo, chatas hachitzona shechnes dama lifnim minayin loch shi psula. Rabbanan say again, if you're learning this pasuk is talking about the chatas hapnimis, where do you learn this din by the chatas hachitzona? Amar lahen, so then Rabbi Yossi HaGlili says to them, Mido Amar le Moshe li Aaron, from the fact that Moshe said to Aaron, Hein lo huva, it says it wasn't brought. Ha huva basreifi, implication is if it was brought into the area it's not supposed to be, then you would burn it. V'shapir of it, the sarfu li altar, and then Moshe was telling Aaron, you did the proper thing. If that was the case, you burned it immediately. So in any case, what's the point of all this? Where do you see anything relevant to our discussion from Rabbi Yossi HaGlili? So Rashi explains, Umidiyalev Rabbi Yossi HaGlili kodshe doros mechatas di Aaron. So what we're really learning from is the Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, what is his response to the Rabbanan? He says, you know where we learn out this halacha by chatas hachitzona? We learn it out from the discussion between Moshe and Aaron from the chatas of Aaron. So alma svir leinami dim huva dama lidoros boy sreifel altar. So what's he really saying? He's learning out a Karban doros, a chatas hachitzona for all generations. He's learning it out from this case that you burn it immediately, ki chatas di Aaron, just like the case of the chatas of Aaron. So he's learning out from the chatas of Aaron to all cases that you would, if you have a psul, then you're going to burn it immediately. V'yafagav de psul hadamhu, and even though this is only a psul in the blood, to have a kipsulo machmas davar acher, which really is not considered a psul haguf, it's considered machmas davar acher, and still you're going to burn it immediately. And the logic of the Gemara of Rab over here is to extend it and to say the same would be true if there would be a psul in the bailam, the blood. The bailam is the same thing. The lo boy ibort sura. You don't need ibort sura. You don't need to let it stay overnight. You just burn it immediately. Now, the Rabbanan don't learn out from the discussion between Aaron and Moshe. So, Savri Doros Misha lo Yalfinan. So they hold you don't learn out Kadshe Doros from Kadshe Shah. That was a carbon that was just for that moment. You don't learn out Karbonis for all generations, the halachas. Uvahihu dekamerlu Moshe. Moshe was saying in this specific case, Timheviu Dama Lifnim boy Sreifa, that if the blood was brought inside, it needs Sreifa. Avoladoros boy Krachrina. But if you want to learn anything out for Ladoros, you're going to need another pasuk. V'gabe ibort sura nami lo yalfinamina. Therefore, we're not going to learn out this halacha of ibort sura either from this pasuk. So that's the machlokas. So you see, the whole point of bringing this statement of Rabbi Yossi Aglili was to show he's learning out this halacha even by dam, and therefore that tells you that you burn it immediately. Now the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan. Now what about Rabbi Yochanan? He didn't list Rabbi Yossi Aglili among the Tanoim that agree with this idea. Rashi says Rabbi Yochanan delo chashav leila Rabbi Yossi Aglili ba'adayu. He didn't list when we were listing the various Tanoim. He didn't include Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Amar loch, he'll say to you nihida shamat le b'psul dam. Granted, Rabbi Yossi Aglili might have this position when it comes to a psul in the blood. The lo ba ibort sura. You don't need ibort sura. B'psul ba'ile mi shamat le dekoi Rabbi Yochanan ben broka. But you don't know that he'll say the same thing when it comes to the bailim becoming tamei, some kind of psul in the bailim. So for Rabbi Yochanan responds to you, Savar, he holds, damu basar chada milsi. Yeah, when it comes to blood, when it comes to basar, that's all in the same category. But bailim milsa achrisahi. When it comes to the bailim, that's a whole other matter. As Rashi over here says, damu basar chada milsi v'havale psula begufo. There I agree, it's a psul haguf. Kilo nitzma basar atzmos, as if the basar itself became tamei, but you can't learn anything out when it comes to a psul in the bailim. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, ha'atzamos v'hagidin v'hanosar. If you have bones of the Karban Pesach, you have sinews of the Karban Pesach, you have noser, you have leftover from the Karban Pesach. So yisrafu b'shisha asar, you burn that on the 16th of Nisan. Cholta zayin lios b'Shabbos. Now if the 16th of Nisan falls out on Shabbos, yisrafu b'yud zayin, then you wait until the 17th of Nisan to burn it. L'fishein andochin loes haShabbos v'loes haYontiv. Because burning of this noser and the bones and the sinews, it's not docha Shabbos or Yontiv. Now, really it became noser already on the 15th. The morning of the 15th, in theory it should be burned, but you can't burn it because the 15th is Yontiv. That's why you have to wait till the 16th, and of course if the 16th happens to be Shabbos, then you have to wait until the 17th. Now Rashi over here points out, first of all, ha'atzamos, shelo yachol l'shovron mimnei shenesra bo shviras ha'etzem. The bones can't be broken because you're not allowed to burn the bones of a Karban Pesach. That's a prohibition. V'nosar b'hen moach. So really what ends up happening is the marrow inside the bones becomes nosar, v'harehu nosar v'ton sreifa. Once it's noser, it requires sreifa. Now, in terms of the sinews, why are you burning those? You could just eat those. The Gemara will ask that question. They were lazy with the meat of the Karban Pesach. They didn't eat it in the proper time. And toser, it became extra. It became noser, it became leftover. Beshisha aser, shuchola shel moed. You got to wait for the 16th of Nisan, which is the first day of Chol HaMoed. Now, even though really it became possible already the morning of the 15th, on the first morning, ein rashai l'sarfa b'yontiv kid mefarish b'gemara. You're not allowed to burn it on Yontiv, as the Gemara will explain. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Mari bar Avua, Amar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Mari bar Avua says in the name of Rav Yitzchak, general halacha, atzmos kodshim, let's say you have bones of karbonos, bones of kodshim, sheshimshu noser, that they serve noser, meaning the bones contain within them marrow, which is noser. So the halacha is they're treated exactly like nosar. Metamen esayadayim, they make the person's hands tamei. That's halacha by nosar as well. Hoel v'nase basis ledavar ha'aser, because they're considered a basis for the nosar, which is a davar ha'aser. So really what Rav Yitzchak here is saying is that the bones which hold, which are a basis for the nosar, have the exact same status as nosar. That was his halacha. So the Gemara now wants to bring a proof from our Mishnah. Name a Messiah. Let's bring a proof to this, a support to his statement from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, "Atzamos v'hagidim v'hanosar yisrafu l'tazayin." Again, it said you burn the atzamos. So Hani Atzamos Hechi Dami, these bones that we're burning, what's the case? Ilema Deles Buhumoach. Now if they have no marrow whatsoever, so Lama Bisreifa, you don't need to burn them. Why are you burning it? Nishdinu, just throw it away. You only burn something which is Roy Lachila. The Atzamos, just the Atzamos, the bones, are not Roy Lachila. They wouldn't be burned. Elipshita de Isbuhumoach. Obviously the case over here is where it has marrow. So Iyamr Bishlama Shimush Noser Milsi. If you're going to say that the fact that the bones serve the noser, there are buzzes for the noser, and that is substantial, so Amtu Lahachi Bois Reifa, that's why you need to burn the bones. They have a status of noser. Eloyamr Shimush Noser Lav Milsi. But if you're going to say that Shimush Noser is not substantial, so Lama Lus Reifa, why do you need to burn it? Nitvarinu V'nechlitza L'moach. What you could just do is break it, take out the marrow, V'nisrfei, burn the marrow, V'nishdinu Lididhu, and throw out the bones. There's no reason to burn the bones over here. This seems to be a support for what Rav Yitzchak said. Elalav shmamina shimush noser milsi. Don't you see from our Mishnah that the serving of noser is considered substantial and the bones have this status of noser? So the Gemara says Amri, so they say the following, it's not necessarily true. No, really, I'm going to tell you shimush noser lav milsa. The fact that it serves noser is irrelevant. The bones do not have a status of noser. V'kasavar bo bekosher ve'afilo bepasul. But the opinion of our Mishnah is that when it comes to the prohibition of v'etzem lo sishbaru bo, that's what the Gemara means with the word bo, it means you're not allowed to break the bones of a kosher Karban Pesach. You can't even break the bones once it becomes pasul. Once these bones are noser, you'll say, oh, maybe the prohibition doesn't apply. No, it does apply. So therefore, there is no alternative. You can't break the bones, but you need to burn that marrow. So if you can't get to the marrow by breaking the bones, your only option is going to be to burn the whole thing. That's actually what the Mishnah holds. So it's not because the bones serve the moach, rather it is because the bones are the only way. You can't get to the moach, so you have to burn it all together. Gemara questions this though. Afilu bepasul sal kadaitach. Do you really think that if you have a pasul Karban Pesach, the halacha v'etzem lo sishbru bo applies? V'atanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, aval hamoser betar, if somebody leaves over Karban Pesach, even if it's pure, v'hashover betame, and if you break the bones of a Karban Pesach that is tame, that is pasul, eino sofek es arboim. This Mishnah says you do not get malchus arboim. You're not punished. So apparently, why are you not punished for breaking the bones? Because it's tame. If you have a pasul Karban Pesach, apparently it doesn't apply. So the Gemara makes a distinction, lokash, it's not difficult, kan shehoisa lo shasa kosher. In one case, at least for some moment, the Karban Pesach was kosher, kan shelo hoisa lo shasa kosher. In the other case, it had no time where it was kosher at all. Rashi over here explains, lo hoisa lo shasa kosher could go nitzma lifnei zrika. The case where, let's say, it became tamei before you even did the zrika sadam, before you threw the blood, you sprinkled the blood, ein bo mishum shviras hatzim. There, taka, there is no prohibition of shviras hatzim, meaning this particular Mishnah which says hashover betame eino sofek es arbaim is talking about in a case where it became possible before the zrika. That's already a different situation. There's no prohibition. But in our Mishnah where it was a kosher Karban Pesach, it later became possible noser, something like that. So then there would be a problem of breaking the bones. And the Gemara says, Uman Tana Deshani Le Ben Shahaisa Lo Shasa Kosher Lo Haisa Lo Shasa Kosher. Who is the Tana that makes such a distinction between when it had a moment of hechsher and when it did not have a moment of hechsher? Rabbi Yaakovi, that is the Tana, Rabbi Yaakov, the Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, V'yetzim Lo Sishbru Bo. It says you're not allowed to break the bones of the Karban Pesach, Bo Bekosher, V'lo Bepasul. The prohibition applies by a Karban Pesach that is kosher, does not apply by a Karban Pesach that is pasul. Rabbi Yaakov says, Haisa Lo Shasa Kosher V'nifsal. If it was kosher at one point and then it became pasul, then yesh bo mishum shviras ha'etzem, then there is actually a prohibition of shviras ha'etzem. Lo haisa lo shasa kosher, if it never was kosher, ein bo mishum shviras ha'etzem, there is no din of shviras ha'etzem. That's where you see Rabbi Yaakov makes the distinction. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon says, echad zeh v'echad zeh, doesn't matter. In any case where there's a psul, ein bo mishum shviras ha'etzem. There is no problem of shviras ha'etzem. So in any case, you see that it is in fact it is the Tana Rabbi Yaakov. Gemara now asks further again on this halacha that Rabbi Yitzchak said that the bones, they have a status of noser because they're serving the noser. Meisvei, we ask from the following. It says, Kol atzmos hakotshim. It says when you have bones of kotshim in general karbonos, ein tu'unin sreifa, you don't need to burn them. Chutz me'atzmos ha'pesach, except when it comes to the bones of the Karban Pesach, mipnei ha'takola, because there you have a real takola, you have a stumbling block. What it seems to be saying is quite simply, when it comes to other kotshim, you just break the bones, you take out what you need to take out, the noser, the marrow, and you burn it, but you don't need to burn the bones. When it comes to Karban Pesach, where you have a prohibition of breaking the bones, that's the takola, so then you have to burn the bones as well. So the Gemara says, Hani atzamos hechidami. What's the situation with these bones? Ilema delesbu moach. If they have no moach, if they have no marrow, lamalu sreifa. Why would you need to burn it? Elapshita de isbu moach. Obviously, they do have a moach. They do have a marrow. Visal kadaitach shimush noser milsi. Now, if you're going to tell me that when it serves the noser, that's considered substantial, and the bone itself is considered noser, so atzmos kachim amayin tunin sreifa. Why wouldn't you burn the bones of regular karbanos as well? That should have the status of noser, but you're not. Apparently, you're breaking the bones. You're taking out the marrow, you're only burning the marrow. So you see, on the contrary, you see the bones do not take on the status of noser. So the Gemara says, no, it could be not. Really, the bones do take on the status of noser. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, but Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains, Hachav mayaskinon, here what is the case? Kegon shemitzon chalutzim. The case of this bryce over here is you actually find the bones have already been broken, the moach's already been taken out. So in such a situation, atzmos kachim, when it comes to the bones of other kachim, de'ein bohen mishum shvira so atzim, there is no prohibition by other karbonos to break the bones. So kame denahave noser chaltzinu, you assume that before the marrow ever became noser, you had broken it apart and you had removed the marrow and never served the noser. V'lo have a shimush noser. You can assume there was no shimush noser. V'lo bo sreifa. That's what the Bryce is saying. That's why you don't need to burn it. In other words, when it comes to, there is no marrow over here. The marrow's been removed. But when it comes to the bones of kachim, it's when can we assume? When we assume by bones of regular kachim, it was removed before it was ever noser, and you don't have to make an assumption that this requires sreifa. But atzmos ha-pesach, but when it comes to the bones of a carbon pesach, the yesh bohen mishum shviras atzim, where there are problems breaking the bones, so levaser didn't have a noser hu dechatzinu. So it was only after it became noser that you removed the moach. You have to make that assumption that the bones were not broken. V'havaluhu shimush noser. So then you're going to say there is a shimush noser over here, ubo sreifa, and it requires sreifa. So in other words, the Gemara is answering what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is answering. It could be on the contrary. The Brisa holds shimush noser is a problem, but the distinction is, it has to do with shvira sa'etzim. Do you assume there was any shimush noser over here or not? By kachim, you don't make that assumption. You assume it was taken out before. By carbon pesach, because there's a problem of breaking the bones, you assume that. Rav Zvid says, Hacham mayaskinon. Here, what are we dealing with? He gives a different answer. Kegon, for example, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis.